Here's how I made the ceramic mug from a 3D digital model. First, I printed the mold pieces with a resin printer. Then, I designed wooden barriers that could be disassembled and reassembled over and over again. These boxes are then filled with silicone rubber. I'm essentially making a mold of the molds. The parts are removed, and the rubber is placed back into the box. And now I can make plaster clones of the original print. To remove any air bubbles, the box is vibrated at the end and given a little spritz of rubbing alcohol. The boxes are made this way so that they can be disassembled and the mold can be released. This particular mold requires 2 of these halves and a base. The pieces are then assembled and rubber banded to dry for 1 to 2 weeks. The molds are made out of plaster so that it dries out anything that touches it, in this case, liquid clay. Once the wall is the perfect thickness, the rest of the clay is poured out, the lip is cleaned up, and the mold can be disassembled. And here's the final result. Here's how I made the ceramic mug from a 3D digital model. Are cleaned up, and this is ready for the kiln. After the first firing, I glaze it with a copper-rich raku glaze, and here's the final result. Let's make an iridescent ceramic ornament. First, I create a 3D model on the computer that's based on the geometry of a perfect sphere. Then I 3D print inverted mold pieces of the model and cover them with silicone so that I have a rubber mold of the original model. Now I can fill these rubber molds with pottery plaster. This process allows me to make as many plaster parts of the original 3D print as I want. The mold parts are rubber banded together and the cavity is filled with liquid clay. The clay is then poured out and a thin wall remains stuck to the plaster. The wall of clay is left to set up a bit, and here's the big reveal. The seam lines of the mold are cleaned up, and this is ready for the kiln. After the first firing, I glaze it with a copper-rich raku glaze, and here's the final result. Let's make this ready for the kiln. And here's the final result. Let's make a ceramic mug from a 3D printed model. First, I build a wooden barrier around the model and fill the void with silicone rubber. Then I remove the part from the rubber and fill that with pottery plaster. Now I have a plaster version of the original master mold. Once all the pieces are cast and assembled, they sit for about 2 weeks or until all the moisture is removed from the plaster. Now I can pour liquid slip into the mold and a thin wall is deposited where the clay touches the plaster. The remaining clay is poured out of the mold to be used again, the lip is cleaned up, and the cup can now be demolded. After some tedious cleanup on the vertical seams and the foot, the piece is ready for the kiln. And here's the final result.